Tomahawk missile was designed to destroy military infrastructure, a weapon built for enemy command posts and supply depots. What one missile found instead on the morning of February 28, 2026, was a school full of children aged 7 to 12. The deadly mistake made by the United States military in its war with Iran quickly raised the question of how something like this could happen. How could the world's most powerful military make such a devastating error? One that cost the lives of 168 civilians. And perhaps, more importantly, who was ultimately responsible? To best answer those questions, we have to go back to the beginning, not of the day, but of the entire conflict. In June of 2025, American President Donald Trump made it clear that disabling Iran's nuclear capabilities was a priority of his foreign policy. A pair of B-2 stealth bombers, loaded with bunker-busting bombs, attempted to carry out that policy, striking Iranian nuclear facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. But those strikes didn't end the conflict. They escalated it. By 2026, the two powers were headed toward a direct confrontation. The United States ordered an enormous strike group consisting of 2 aircraft carriers, 7 guided missile destroyers, and hundreds of aircraft, ranging from B-52 bombers to F-35 fighter jets into the Middle East, clearly preparing for a massive military operation to finish what it had started in June. The goal of that operation, in addition to removing Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei from power, was to destroy Iranian offensive missiles, destroy Iranian missile production, destroy their navy and other security infrastructure, and they will never have nuclear weapons, said United States Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. It was during the opening hours of Operation Epic Fury that one strike would go horribly wrong, bringing on catastrophic consequences to a group of innocent civilians. The morning of February 28th began just like any other in the city of Minab, located in Iran's Hormozgan province. Workers rushed into their shops, cars honked in the streets, and students filed into their classrooms at the Sajjare Tayyebe Primary School. But by 10 a.m. local time, February 28th had changed into an unforgettably terrifying day. Iranian airspace was flooded with American military jets as F-16s, F-22s, and F-35s began their assaults on priority targets throughout Iran. JDAMs ripped apart command centers while Hellfire missiles screamed through the air, disabling Iranian radar capabilities and smashing buildings suspected to be owned by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. By 10:15, the Iranian government had declared a national emergency, closing schools and recommending that its citizens find shelter amid the ongoing attacks. As American airstrikes devastated targets across Iran, the atmosphere inside the Sajjare Tayyebe Primary School shifted from routine to panic. Parents rushed to the gates, staff scrambled to reach families, classrooms emptied as quickly as they could. But for those who remained on the grounds, those efforts to bring them to safety were too late. An American Tomahawk missile hit the school, covering the area in rubble and a cloud of dust. Rescuers desperately tried to reach anyone trapped under the wreckage, but the damage had been done. In a single moment, it became one of the deadliest incidents of civilian casualties in modern American warfare, one that will forever be defined by the loss of children. As the rescue efforts continued to reveal the extent of the carnage, attention quickly turned to a different question: who or what was responsible for this? The answer, at first, seemed obvious. The strike came in the middle of a massive American barrage that saw over 5,000 munitions fired in the first 96 hours of attacks. To many, it looked like an open and shut case. But as that conclusion spread, a very different explanation emerged from Washington. President Trump rejected the idea that the US had a hand in the strike entirely, saying, "In my opinion, based on what I've seen, we think it was done by Iran because they're very inaccurate with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran." In a matter of hours, the narrative had split in two. One half pointed squarely at a side claiming to fight for freedom and the protection of those killed in the strike, while the other pointed at the regime they lived under. Unlike the political narratives that began to build for both sides, the evidence found at Shajaret-e-Ebe Primary School could tell no lies. It would ultimately tell the story of how gross negligence and carelessness led to an entirely preventable tragedy in the opening hours of the Iran War. Iranian investigators and rescuers began to comb through the scene, hunting for anything that could help clarify the origin of the strike. Any fragment could carry a signature, a design feature, a detail that could help identify the munition. Scattered throughout the blast site were thousands of pieces of debris, most of which were unrecognizable. 3 critical pieces of evidence, however, were not. Assembled and photographed by Iranian state media, part of a circuit board, a satellite data link antenna, and an actuator motor bearing the stamp "Made in the USA" were found at the school. Every piece of evidence pointed to one specific weapon, the Tomahawk cruise missile. The Tomahawk is a precision-guided missile designed for strikes against high-value military targets. More importantly, it is used almost exclusively by the United States, which meant that, despite the competing narratives, the physical evidence was pointing in a very specific direction. The question was no longer who carried out the strike, but how an American weapon designed for precision strikes on military strongpoints ended up destroying a school full of children and staff. In order to answer that question, it is necessary to look beyond the missile itself and into the system that guided it to its target. Tomahawks do not pick their own objectives. That job is reserved for a long chain of intelligence workers tasked with gathering information from satellites, drones, and surveillance to determine what is a legitimate military target. Once a target is deemed eligible, its location is converted into coordinates that are uploaded onto the Tomahawk's internal GPS system. From that point on, the missile doesn't see its target. It flies where it was told to, whether that is a heavily defended enemy stronghold or a school. The weapon does not make the distinction. When a strike fails, it's rarely because the munition itself simply missed its target. It's because the coordinates it was given were wrong. The Tomahawk that hit the Shajaret-e-Ebe Primary School landed exactly where it was told to. The failure did not happen in the air. It happened long before the missile was ever programmed, loaded, and fired. As time passed, the focus shifted away from the weapon and onto the intelligence that gave it its coordinates. Early findings pointed to a troubling possibility. The location struck by the missile may have been misidentified long before the attack ever began. Satellite imagery shows the school sitting just beside a compound of nearly 20 buildings, all enclosed by a perimeter fence. But that fence wasn't always there. It was only constructed in 2015. Before that, the school building had been part of the same compound. That compound housed medical facilities and administrative hubs of the IRGC, Iran's most elite military unit, and one of the US's highest priority targets. 7 of them were hit by American cruise missiles nearly simultaneously with the school. The evidence pointed in a clear direction. The United States intelligence community likely failed to recognize that the building had been repurposed away from its military use, instead grouping it in with the other IRGC buildings on the compound. American General Dan Kane said himself that the operation marked the culmination of months, and in some cases, years of deliberate planning and refinement against this particular target set. It is easy to see how a seemingly small detail could slip through the cracks of years of intelligence gathering. A target considered legitimate years ago was never reclassified, even as it changed from a building of soldiers to a building of children and teachers who had no part in military matters. When Operation Epic Fury began, the missiles landed exactly where they were supposed to, flying to the coordinates provided to them by American intelligence. The failure of that intelligence cost the lives of hundreds of innocent civilians in Manab on the morning of February 28th. In modern warfare, strikes like this one are not the result of a single decision, or even a decision made by a single branch of the United States military. They rely on a system of intelligence, verification, and decision-making at the highest levels. The first failure came from the intelligence. The school had been removed from the IRGC compound in 2015 and should have been reevaluated and subsequently removed from any targeting list. Perhaps more concerning is the failure that followed from the command centers in the United States intelligence communities. As the US prepared to strike Iran, targeting lists were doubtlessly placed in front of countless officers and intelligence officials for review. Despite the fact that the school was removed from the compound in 2015, the higher echelons of the United States Armed Forces failed to verify the validity of the target, eventually approving it for a strike. Every safeguard in place to prevent a tragedy like this failed. Whether that failure was the result of rushed decision-making, gaps in communication, or simple human error is still unclear. But what is clear is that no single point in the process was enough to stop the strike from moving forward. Responsibility then becomes difficult to isolate. It cannot lie with a single person or group, but is instead shared throughout the branches and services that helped approve the strike. And above it all sits the broader context in which those decisions, or lack thereof, were made. A military operation where speed and volume took precedence over caution. When thousands of munitions are deployed in hours, even a small failure in the system can have devastating consequences. And in this case, that failure cost 168 innocent people their lives, most of them children, which leaves one final, uncomfortable question. If responsibility is shared across the system, can anyone truly be held accountable? The Minab strike was never supposed to happen, but it was not the result of a weapons failure or of an accidental detonation. Instead, it was the result of a system working exactly as it was designed to. The chain of command followed its process, and the missile followed its route, making the outcome all the more unsettling. It shows that modern warfare, for all the precision and technological power it boasts, is just as fallible to human error as ever. Modern weapons rely on constant intelligence updates, constant legwork from those tasked with handling them, with modern munitions representing the most lethal the world has ever seen. Any mistake in the course of that legwork can lead to tragedy on an unprecedented scale. The horrific events at the Shahjareh Tayyibeh Primary School are a reminder that even the most technologically advanced fighting force the world has ever seen is only as strong as the individuals manning it. Behind every precision strike is a chain of human decisions, all of which are hampered by human limitations. To the victims of such strikes, the distinction between human and computer error means nothing. What matters is the outcome: 168 innocent people dead, the majority of them between the ages of 7 and 12. Their loss must bring up the question of how many tragedies in the era of modern warfare continue to be the result of human error, and how that knowledge should impact the future of modern military decision-making.